While searching for my wife at her office, I noticed a gold-plated pen engraved with my daughter's name. The moment I picked it up, I heard a mechanical click. A hidden wall opened before my eyes. Curiosity drove me to step inside. What I found made my hands tremble and took my breath away, because the truth I'd been searching for all this time had been imprisoned in this very room. Thank you for being here. Before we continue, hit like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Quick note, this is a fictional story with dramatized elements for storytelling and educational value. Any resemblance to real events is coincidental, but the message is deeply meaningful. Now let me tell you what happened next. The Seattle rain hadn't let up since morning. I drove through it anyway, wipers slapping a rhythm against the windshield that matched the unease in my chest. I needed to see Vanessa, to talk, to feel connected to something. Anything that didn't remind me that my daughter had been gone for 6 months and 3 days. Columbia Center rose like a steel monolith against the gray November sky. 76 floors of glass and ambition. Pierce Development Corporation occupied the 28th floor had for 18 years. I'd built this company from the ground up with my late wife Jennifer. Now it felt like walking through someone else's dream. I parked in my reserved spot and took the elevator up, barely noticing the familiar hum of machinery or the soft chime at each floor. My mind was elsewhere. It had been elsewhere since April 15th. Since the day Natalie's car was found abandoned near Rattlesnake Ledge, doors open, keys inside, no sign of my daughter anywhere. The elevator doors opened onto the 28th floor. Our reception area was all dark wood and understated elegance, Jennifer's design years ago. Amanda Clark looked up from behind the curved desk, her professional smile faltering just slightly when she saw me. "Mr. Pierce," she said, her voice careful. "I wasn't expecting you today." "Is Vanessa in?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Lately, everyone spoke to me like I was made of glass, like if they said the wrong thing, I'd shatter. Amanda glanced at her computer screen. "She's with a client right now. A design consultation. Should be another 20 minutes or so." She paused. "Would you like me to let her know you're here?" I shook my head. "No need. I'll wait in her office." I had a key. Vanessa had given it to me 6 months ago after we'd gotten married. "You're always welcome in my space," she'd said, pressing the small silver key into my palm. At the time, it had felt like trust, like intimacy. Now, walking down the hallway toward her corner office, I wasn't sure what it felt like. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Vanessa's office was everything mine wasn't: warm, inviting, filled with soft textures and carefully chosen art. A massive mahogany desk sat beneath windows that looked out over Elliott Bay. On clear days, you could see the Olympic Mountains. Today, there was only fog. I dropped into one of the leather chairs facing her desk, trying to shake off the cold that had settled in my bones. The office smelled like her perfume, something subtle, expensive, floral. For a moment, I let myself close my eyes and just breathe. When I opened them again, my gaze landed on her desk. It was immaculate, as always. A silver pen holder, a small succulent in a ceramic pot, a leather-bound planner closed, and beside the planner, lying at an angle like someone had set it down in a hurry, was a pen. Not just any pen. A Mont Blanc. Gold-plated. The kind that weighs more than it should, that feels serious in your hand. I knew that pen. My heart did something strange, a stutter step, that made me sit forward, suddenly alert. I reached across the desk and picked it up, my fingers closing around the cool metal barrel. There, just above the clip, barely visible unless you were looking for it, were 2 words engraved in delicate script: Natalie P. The air left my lungs. I turned the pen over in my hands, searching for some explanation, some reason this couldn't be what I knew it was. But there was no mistaking it. I'd had this pen custom-made 4 years ago at a little shop in Pioneer Square. Jennifer and I had picked it out together for Natalie's 18th birthday. We'd spent 20 minutes debating the font for the engraving. Natalie had loved it. She'd carried it everywhere, to classes, to coffee shops, to late-night study sessions. "It makes me feel professional," she'd joked. "Like a real adult." She'd promised she'd never lose it. But Natalie had been missing since April. The police had found her car 40 minutes outside the city, abandoned on a trail access road. Her phone had been inside, screen shattered. Her wallet, her keys, but no Natalie. The official theory was that she'd gone hiking alone. Maybe fallen, maybe gotten lost in the dense forest that surrounded Rattlesnake Ledge. Search and rescue had combed the area for 2 weeks. They'd found nothing. After a month, Detective Hayes had sat across from me in my living room and said the words I'd been dreading, "Mr. Pierce, at this point, we have to consider the possibility that Natalie isn't coming back." I'd stopped listening after that. So why was her pen, the pen she'd promised never to lose, sitting on my wife's desk? I stood up, still holding it, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe Natalie had visited Vanessa before she disappeared. Maybe she'd left it here by accident. Maybe no. That didn't make sense. Natalie and Vanessa weren't close. My daughter had been polite to my new wife, but distant. There was no reason for Natalie to have been in this office. Unless. I stared at the pen, turning it over again. It was heavier than I remembered. Too heavy. On instinct, or maybe desperation, I gripped the pen firmly and pulled upward. For a second, nothing happened. Then I heard it, a soft, mechanical click, like the sound of a lock disengaging. I froze. The wall behind Vanessa's bookshelf, the one lined with design portfolios and leather-bound volumes, shuddered. Then, with a low hum, the entire section began to slide to the left, revealing a gap I hadn't known existed. Behind the wall was darkness and stairs, a narrow staircase descending into a space that shouldn't be there. I stood at the edge of Vanessa's office, the pen still clutched in my hand, staring into a black void I couldn't explain. My heart hammered against my ribs. My mouth had gone dry. Somewhere in the building, I heard the muffled chime of an elevator. Voices in the hallway. I should have called someone. I should have backed away, found Amanda, asked questions. Instead, I took a step forward. And then another. The darkness swallowed me whole. The air changed as I descended. Colder. Thicker. The kind of air that hasn't moved in a long time. I found the wall with my left hand, rough concrete, slightly damp, and used it to guide myself down. Each step was narrow, steep, the kind of stairs that weren't meant to be used often. I counted them without thinking. 10, 15, 20. At the bottom, my eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light. There was a single LED fixture in the ceiling, casting everything in a pale, clinical glow. What I saw made no sense. A room. Maybe 12 feet by 15. The walls were covered in some kind of foam paneling, soundproofing, I realized, with a sick lurch in my stomach. In one corner, a single bed with a thin mattress and a gray blanket. Beside it, a small table with a bottle of water and what looked like protein bars. Against the opposite wall, a mini fridge, the kind you'd find in a college dorm, a narrow door, presumably a bathroom. And in the far corner, mounted high where it could see everything, a camera with a blinking red light. The room was clean, organized. Someone had designed this space with care. I took one step forward, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. And that's when I noticed the figure on the bed. She was curled on her side, facing away from me, her body small beneath the blanket. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Dark hair, longer than I remembered, tangled and dull, thin shoulders. A hand resting on the pillow fingers, pale and delicate. Natalie. My voice cracked on her name. The figure stirred. Slowly, she turned over, blinking in the dim light. When her eyes found mine, They went wide not with recognition, but with something closer to disbelief. Like she was seeing a ghost. Not to Lee. I said again, and this time I was moving, crossing the small space in 3 strides, dropping to my knees beside the bed. She pushed herself up on one elbow, staring at me. Her face was gaunt shadows under her eyes, her cheekbones sharper than they should be. But it was her. My daughter. Alive. Dad. The word was barely a whisper. I reached for her, and she flinched just slightly, an instinctive recoil. But then she seemed to understand that I was real, that this wasn't some trick or hallucination. She collapsed forward into my arms, and then she was sobbing. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. I held her one hand, cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her 2 thin shoulders, and I felt my own tears streak hot down my face. "You're here," she kept saying over and over. "You're really here." "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here. I've got you." I pulled back just enough to look at her to catalog the damage. She was pale, too pale and thin in a way that made my chest ache. Her hair was matted, her lips chapped. There were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and fear, but her eyes were clear, focused. She was weak, but she was coherent. "How?" Her voice caught. "How did you find me?" "Your pen," I said, still trying to wrap my mind around the impossibility of this moment. "The Mont Blanc. It was on Vanessa's desk. When I picked it up," I gestured vaguely toward the stairs. The wall opened. Natalie's expression shifted. Something dark and knowing passed over her face. "She kept it," Natalie said, her voice hollow. "She kept it as I don't know, a trophy maybe." "Natalie, what happened? Where have you been? We thought—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "We thought you were gone. We thought you were lost in the woods, that we'd never—" "She drugged me," Natalie said, her voice steadier now, though her hands were shaking. "Vanessa, 6 months ago, April. She asked me to meet her. Said she wanted to talk. Woman to woman. Try to, I don't know, build a relationship or something." I felt my jaw tighten. "Where?" "Here at the office, after hours. She said she had a bottle of wine in her office that we could just talk." Natalie's laugh was bitter broken. "I didn't want to come, but I thought maybe I was being unfair to her. Maybe I should try." "Natalie." "She gave me a glass of wine. We talked for maybe 10 minutes, and then I started feeling strange. Dizzy. She said I looked pale, that maybe I should sit down. I remember sitting in her chair. And then—" Natalie's voice trailed off. "I woke up here. My hands curled into fists. I thought of Vanessa, my wife, the woman who'd held me when I cried over Natalie's disappearance, who'd sat with me through sleepless nights, who'd told me we had to keep hoping, keep believing. She'd been lying the entire time. While I'd been falling apart, she'd known exactly where Natalie was." "How long have you been here?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. 6 months, Natalie whispered. "She comes down once a week, brings food, checks on me. Natalie's voice cracked. "She told me no one would ever find me, that eventually the law would declare me gone. And then—" She swallowed hard. "She said it wouldn't matter anymore." I pulled her close again, pressing my forehead to the top of her head. I'm so sorry. God, Natalie, I'm so sorry." "You didn't know," she said quietly. "How could you have known?" "But I should have. That was the thing that would haunt me. I'd married Vanessa a year after Jennifer passed away. I'd brought her into our lives, into our home. I'd trusted her. And all this time I couldn't think about it. Not now. Right now, the only thing that mattered was getting Natalie out. "Can you walk?" I asked, pulling back to look at her again. She nodded, though she looked uncertain. "I think so. I'm just weak. She doesn't give me much. Just enough to keep me—" She trailed off, unable to say the word. "Alive." "Okay." I stood, then reached down to help her up. She swayed on her feet, and I steadied her, my arm around her waist. She weighed almost nothing. "We're getting you out of here. Right now." "What about Vanessa?" Natalie asked, her voice trembling. "Nah, she'll know. She'll see on the camera." "I don't care," I said, and I meant it. "Let Vanessa see. Let her know I'd found what she'd hidden. We're leaving. Come on." I guided her toward the stairs, moving slowly, letting her lean on me. Her legs shook with each step, but she kept moving. As we reached the bottom of the staircase and started to climb, I looked back one last time at the room. The clinical lighting, the soundproof walls, the camera still blinking its red eye. Someone had built this, planned it, made it a prison. And my wife had kept my daughter here for half a year. We climbed. We reached the top of the stairs, just as the sharp click of heels echoed down the hallway outside Vanessa's office. My blood went cold. "Dad." Natalie started to speak, but I pressed a finger to my lips and pulled her toward the back wall. My hand fumbled along the seam of a narrow service door I'd seen maintenance crews use years ago. It gave way with a soft creak, and we slipped into a dim, concrete corridor that smelled of old paint and machine oil. The hallway was silent except for our ragged breathing. Natalie leaned heavily against my shoulder, her legs trembling. I could hear her trying not to cry. Behind us, the muffled sound of Vanessa's voice filtered through the walls. She was talking to someone, maybe Amanda, at the front desk. "We have to move," I whispered. At the end of the corridor, a dented freight elevator waited with its heavy metal gate half open. I guided Natalie inside, pulled the gate closed as quietly as I could, and hit the button for the parking garage. The elevator groaned and lurched downward. Each floor felt like an eternity. I watched the numbers descend 27, 26, 25, and prayed Vanessa wouldn't notice the service panel light up on her floor. When the doors finally opened onto the dim concrete of the underground garage, I scanned the rows of parked cars. Mine was near the back exit. I wrapped my arm around Natalie's waist and half carried her toward it. She was so light, so fragile. 6 months in that room had stolen her strength. I opened the back door and helped her slide across the seat. "Lie down," I said, pulling off my coat and draping it over her. "Stay low. Don't let anyone see you." She nodded, her pale face disappearing beneath the fabric. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove out of the garage as calmly as I could manage. My hands were shaking on the wheel. The streets of Seattle blurred past. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Vanessa's car tailing us. But there was nothing. Just rain and brake lights, and the ordinary flow of Friday afternoon traffic. I drove north toward Laurelhurst, toward the one person I knew I could trust. Harold Peterson had been our family's lawyer for nearly 20 years. He'd handled Jennifer's will when she passed 5 years ago, and he'd been the one to comfort me through the worst months of my grief. If anyone could help us now, it was Harold. His house sat at the end of a quiet, tree-lined street, a brick Tudor with ivy climbing the walls. I pulled into the driveway and sent him a single text, "Emergency. At your door, please." Seconds later, the front door opened. Harold stood there in a cardigan and slippers, his silver hair disheveled. When he saw me, his expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Jonathan, what's—" "I need your help," I said. I opened the back door and gently lifted Natalie to her feet. Harold's face went white. "My God. Natalie?" His wife Linda appeared behind him, her hand flying to her mouth. She rushed forward and took Natalie's other arm, guiding her inside. They led her to the living room couch, and Linda disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with a thick blanket and a glass of water. Natalie took the water with trembling hands and drank slowly. She looked so small, wrapped in that blanket, her eyes hollow and haunted. Harold sat down across from us, his lawyer instincts kicking in despite the shock. "Jonathan, where has she been? We need to call the police." "No," I said sharply. "Not yet." I told him everything. The pen, the hidden staircase, the room beneath Vanessa's office, the camera still recording in that concrete cell. Harold listened in silence, his face growing darker with every word. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "This is kidnapping," he said. "You understand that, right? Vanessa held your daughter captive for 6 months." "I know." My voice cracked. "But if we call the police now, she'll know. She'll destroy the evidence. That camera, the room, everything could disappear before anyone can see it." Natalie's voice was barely a whisper. "She drugged me." We all turned to look at her. 6 months ago. Natalie continued, staring down at her hands. "April 15th. Vanessa invited me to meet her for coffee. She said she wanted to talk to clear the air between us. I didn't trust her, but I thought maybe we could find some way to get along." Her voice trembled. "She put something in my drink. I woke up in that room. She told me no one would look for me. She said they'd found my car abandoned near Rattlesnake Ledge Trail. She said eventually they'd assume I was gone, and then no one would ever ask questions." My chest tightened. Rattlesnake Ledge, a popular hiking spot east of the city known for its steep cliffs and dangerous terrain. Of course, a staged accident. "She came to see me every week," Natalie said. "She brought food, water. She told me it was only temporary. That once everything was settled legally, she'd let me go." I didn't believe that for a second. Neither did Harold. Then Natalie looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't expected, fear mixed with anger. "Dad," she said quietly. It wasn't just Vanessa. My stomach dropped. Uncle Stephen was part of it too. The room went silent. Stephen Barrett, my business partner, my friend of 18 years, the man who'd stood beside me at Jennifer's funeral, who'd helped me rebuild Pierce Development when I could barely get out of bed. "No," I said. "That's not—" "I heard them talking," Natalie said. High through the camera. They thought I was asleep, but I heard everything. He helped her plan it. The world tilted beneath me. Harold placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Jonathan, we need to decide what we're going to do. And we need to do it now." I stared at my daughter, alive, rescued, but still so far from safe, and felt the weight of every choice I'd ever made pressing down on me. Outside, the rain kept falling on Seattle. Harold stood up from his chair, his face flushed with urgency. "Jonathan, we have to call the police. Right now. This is a criminal case, kidnapping, false imprisonment. God knows what else. Every minute we wait is a minute Vanessa and Stephen could use to cover their tracks." I shook my head slowly. "If we call the police now, they'll know. Vanessa will know the second officers show up at Columbia Center. She'll destroy the room, wipe the camera footage, claim she has no idea what we're talking about. By the time investigators get a warrant, there won't be anything left to find. Jonathan and Stephen." I continued, my voice harder now. "He's the CFO of Pierce Development. He has access to every file, every account, every piece of documentation we've ever created. If he knows we're onto him, he'll burn it all before anyone can prove a thing." Harold opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. He looked at Natalie, who sat curled beneath the blanket on his couch, her eyes distant and unfocused. She'd been through hell. The last thing she needed was to watch her rescue fall apart, because we moved too fast. "So, what do you want to do?" Harold asked quietly. "I need time," I said. "Time to gather evidence. Time to figure out exactly what they've done and why. Then we go to the authorities with something they can't ignore." Harold was silent for a long moment. Finally, he sighed and walked over to his desk. He opened a drawer, pulled out a business card, and handed it to me. The card was simple, printed on heavy cream-colored stock: Sharon Mitchell, private investigator, former FBI special agent, a phone number, an email address, nothing else. "Sharon worked major fraud cases for the Bureau for 15 years, Harold said. "She's discreet, thorough, and she knows how to build a case that'll hold up in court. If anyone can help you do this the right way, it's her." I looked down at the card, then back at Harold. "Thank you." He nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "Just promise me one thing. If this gets dangerous, if Vanessa or Stephen realizes what you're doing, you call the police immediately. No hesitation. Understood." "Understood." I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the card. It rang 3 times before a calm, professional voice answered. "Mitchell Investigations." "Ms. Mitchell, my name is Jonathan Pierce. Harold Peterson gave me your number. I need your help with a sensitive matter." There was a brief pause. "Harold's a good man. What kind of matter are we talking about?" I glanced at Natalie, then at Harold. "It's complicated. I'd rather explain in person." "Can you meet tonight?" "Yes. There's a cafe near Pike Place Market, corner of First and Pine, 8 o'clock. I'll be there." "Good. And Mr. Pierce." Her voice sharpened slightly. "Come alone. If this is as sensitive as you say, we don't need an audience." The line went dead. I pocketed my phone and looked at Harold. "I have to go home first. If Vanessa suspects anything, if she realizes Natalie's gone, this whole thing falls apart." Linda appeared in the doorway holding a tray with soup and crackers. She set it down in front of Natalie and gave me a long, searching look. "Be careful," she said softly. I nodded. "Natalie stays here. Don't let anyone know she's with you. Not even your neighbors." Harold walked me to the door. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, my phone buzzed. Vanessa's name lit up the screen. My stomach tightened. I answered, forcing my voice to sound casual. "Hey. Honey, where are you?" Vanessa's tone was light, almost playful. "I tried calling you earlier, but you didn't pick up. I was starting to worry." "Sorry, I was in back-to-back meetings all afternoon. You know how Fridays get." The lie came so easily, it scared me. "Just wrapped up a budget review with Vincent Caldwell. We're trying to nail down projections for the 4th quarter. "Oh, that sounds exhausting." She laughed, that warm, familiar sound I used to love. Now it made my skin crawl. "Well, hurry home. I'm making your favorite rosemary chicken with roasted potatoes." "Sounds perfect. I'll be there soon." I ended the call and sat in my car for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The drive back to our house in Broadmoor felt surreal. I passed the same streets I'd driven 1,000 times, the same trees lining the sidewalks, the same lights glowing in familiar windows. Everything looked normal. Everything looked exactly the way it had this morning. But nothing was normal. Nothing would ever be normal again. I pulled into the driveway at 6:45. The house was lit up warm and inviting. Through the kitchen window, I could see Vanessa moving around setting the table. I took a deep breath, got out of the car, and walked inside. "There you are!" Vanessa smiled and came over to kiss me. Her hands were warm against my chest. She smelled like rosemary and wine. How was your day? Long, I said, managing a tired smile. Vincent's worried about the Tacoma project. Thinks we're going over budget. You'll figure it out. You always do. She handed me a glass of red wine. I took the glass, took a sip. It tasted like ash in my mouth. We sat down to dinner. Vanessa talked about her day, a client meeting fabric samples, something about a design conference in Portland next month. I nodded, asked the right questions, laughed at the right moments. All the while I kept seeing Natalie's pale, hollow face, kept hearing her voice. She drugged me. She said no one would look for me. By 7:30, I'd finished eating and pushed my plate aside. I almost forgot I have a meeting with Harold tonight. We need to go over some paperwork for the estate trust. Jennifer's anniversary is coming up, and there are a few things we need to finalize. Vanessa's expression softened. Oh, honey, I know that's hard for you. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back, smiled. I won't be late, I said. She kissed me goodbye at the door, her lips soft and familiar. Drive safe. I got in my car, pulled out of the driveway, and didn't exhale until I'd turned the corner. 20 minutes later, I parked near Pike Place Market. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. Through the window, I could see a woman sitting alone at a corner table, mid-40s, dark hair, pulled back sharp eyes, scanning the room. Sharon Mitchell. I walked inside and she looked up. Our eyes met. I crossed the cafe and sat down across from her. Mr. Pierce. Yes. She folded her hands on the table. Tell me everything. And I did. I told Sharon everything. The pen with Natalie's name, the hidden wall behind the bookshelf, the staircase leading down into that soundproofed concrete room where my daughter had been held for 6 months. Vanessa's weekly visits, the staged accident at Rattlesnake Ledge, Stephen Barrett's involvement. Sharon didn't interrupt once. She sat across from me with a small leather notebook open in front of her, writing in quick, precise strokes. Her face remained calm, neutral, the kind of expression that came from years of listening to terrible stories without flinching. When I finally finished, she set down her pen and looked at me. Mr. Pierce, I need to ask you some questions. They might feel intrusive, but they're necessary. I nodded. Whatever you need. When did you marry Vanessa? June 2021, almost 4 years ago. And when did you meet her? May 2020, at a fundraiser for the Seattle Arts Foundation. She was representing an interior design firm, Sterling and Associates. We talked about architecture design philosophy. She was charming, intelligent. She understood my work in a way most people don't. Sharon wrote something down. And how long after you met did you start seeing each other seriously? A few months. We dated through the summer, got engaged that December. I thought, my voice cracked, I thought I was ready to move on. Jennifer had been gone a year. Natalie encouraged me. She said her mother wouldn't want me to be alone forever. What do you know about Vanessa's life before you met her? I opened my mouth to answer, then stopped. What did I know? She grew up in California. I said slowly. San Diego, I think. She went to design school, somewhere in the Southwest. She moved to Seattle in 2019 to start her firm. Did you ever meet her family? No. She said her parents had passed. No siblings. Friends from before she moved to Seattle. I frowned. A few, but no one close. She said she was focused on building her business. Sharon leaned forward slightly. Mr. Pierce, did you ever visit her office, the one for Sterling and Associates? My stomach tightened. No. She always met clients at their locations or worked from home. She said it was more personal that way. Did she have business partners, employees? She mentioned a few contractors she worked with, but I never met them. Sharon closed her notebook and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. Mr. Pierce, I don't think you know very much about your wife at all. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. She was right. I'd married a woman I barely knew. I'd brought her into my home, introduced her to my daughter, given her access to my life, and I couldn't name a single verifiable fact about her past. How had I been so blind? Here's what we're going to do, Sharon said, her voice firm and steady. First, Natalie stays exactly where she is. Harold's house is safe, and no one outside this room needs to know she's there. If Vanessa or Stephen realize she's free, they'll disappear before we can build a case against them. I nodded. Second, you go home tonight and continue acting normal. Nothing changes. You go to work, you have dinner with Vanessa, you do everything exactly the way you've been doing it. Can you do that? Yes. Third, I'm going to run a full background check on Vanessa Sterling. I'll also look into Stephen Barrett Financial Records communications, anything that might tell us what they're planning. What about evidence? I asked. Not the room under her office. We can't touch it yet. Not without tipping them off. But we will. Once we understand what we're dealing with, we'll figure out how to document it in a way that holds up in court. She pulled a small black case from her bag and set it on the table. Inside were what looked like ordinary pens, a phone charger, even a wall clock. Surveillance equipment, she explained. Hidden cameras and audio recorders. I'll need you to place these in strategic locations, your home, maybe your office. Anywhere Vanessa or Stephen might talk when they think they're alone. I stared at the devices. The idea of spying on my own wife, of turning my home into a surveillance site, made my skin crawl. But I thought of Natalie in that concrete room, weak and terrified, and I knew I didn't have a choice. I'll do it. Sharon nodded, then pulled out her laptop and opened it on the table. Let's start with the basics. You said Vanessa's firm is called Sterling and Associates. Yes. She typed quickly, then turned the screen toward me. A sleek, professional website filled the display, Sterling and Associates Interior Design. Luxury spaces designed with elegance and purpose. There were photos of beautifully decorated rooms, testimonials from supposed clients, a portfolio of high-end projects. Looks legitimate, doesn't it? Sharon said. I nodded slowly. She clicked a few more times, pulling up a separate window. This is the domain registration information. SterlingandAssociates.com was created on March 15, 2020, 2 months before you met Vanessa at that fundraiser. My chest tightened. Now look at this. She opened another tab showing a business directory. No physical office address. The contact number goes to a generic voicemail. And these testimonials. She clicked on one of the glowing reviews. The names don't match any real people in the Seattle area. I ran a reverse image search on the portfolio photos. Half of them are stock images from design magazines. I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Mr. Pierce, Sharon said quietly. I don't think your wife is an interior designer. I don't think Sterling and Associates ever existed as a real company. This website was built specifically to create a credible identity for someone who needed one. The cafe suddenly felt too small, too hot. I couldn't breathe. Who is she? I whispered. Sharon's expression was grim. That's what we're going to find out. She closed the laptop and handed me the case of surveillance equipment. Go home. Act normal. Place these devices where they won't be noticed. And whatever you do, don't let Vanessa see that you know. I nodded, numb. I left the cafe and walked to my car. The streets of Seattle were dark and wet. the lights from Pike Place Market reflecting off the rain-slicked pavement. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at nothing. Who had I married? Who was the woman sleeping in my bed, eating at my table, living in the home I'd built with Jennifer? I didn't know. And for the first time since I'd found Natalie in that hidden room, I felt truly afraid. I started the engine and drove home through the rain. Vanessa was waiting. Saturday morning, Vanessa made coffee. I heard the familiar sounds from the kitchen, the grinder whirring water running, the soft clink of ceramic mugs on the counter. Through the bedroom doorway, I could see her moving with the easy grace of someone performing a routine she'd done 1,000 times. She appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, holding a steaming mug in each hand. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she wore one of my old work shirts over her pajamas. She looked warm and sleepy and perfectly domestic. "Good morning, handsome," she said, handing me one of the mugs. "How'd you sleep?" "Fine," I lied. "I'd barely slept at all." She kissed my forehead and settled onto the edge of the bed beside me. "I thought we could drive out to Snoqualmie Falls today. It's supposed to be beautiful. We haven't done anything like that in forever." I took the mug from her, held it between my hands. The coffee smelled rich and familiar, the same blend we'd been drinking for years, and then something clicked in my mind. 4 months. For the past 4 months, I'd been forgetting things. Small things at first, where I'd left my car keys, the name of a contractor I'd worked with for years, appointments I'd scheduled, and then completely blanked on. I'd chalked it up to stress grief over Natalie's disappearance, the weight of running the company, without Stephen's help on certain projects. But what if it wasn't stress? What if it was the coffee I watched Vanessa sip from her own mug, her expression content and relaxed? She had no idea I knew about the room. No idea Natalie was safe. No idea Sharon Mitchell was digging into her past. "That sounds nice," I said carefully. "Let me take a shower first." "Take your time." She kissed me again and left the room. The moment she was gone, I stood and walked quietly to the closet. There was a small insulated thermos on the top shelf, one I'd used for hiking trips years ago. I pulled it down, carried it into the bathroom, and locked the door behind me. I poured the entire cup of coffee into the thermos, sealed it tight, and turned on the shower to cover the sound. When I came out 15 minutes later, the mug sat empty on the nightstand. Vanessa was downstairs making breakfast. By mid-afternoon, I felt different. My mind felt sharper, clearer, as if a fog I hadn't realized was there had started to lift. I could focus on conversations without losing track halfway through. I remembered things, names, numbers, details that would have slipped away from me just yesterday. And then I remembered something else. The vitamins. Every morning for the past 4 months, Vanessa had given me a small white pill with breakfast. "You need to take better care of yourself, honey," she'd said the first time. "These are good for you. Multivitamins with extra B complex. They'll help with your energy." I'd taken them without question. I went into the bathroom, opened the medicine cabinet, and found the bottle. The label read, "Daily Wellness Complex. Take 1 tablet daily with food." No brand name, no pharmacy label, just a generic white bottle with a printed sticker. I shook 1 pill into my hand, wrapped it in tissue, and slipped it into my pocket. That evening, as we sat on the couch, watching a movie, neither of us was really paying attention. Vanessa turned to me with a look of concern. "Jonathan, I've been worried about you. You've been so forgetful lately. Maybe you should go see Dr. Mitchell again. He might want to adjust your prescription." Dr. Howard Mitchell. Vanessa had introduced me to him 2 months ago, after I'd mentioned offhandedly that I'd been having trouble concentrating. She'd insisted I see a specialist, someone who could help. Dr. Mitchell had an office in Bellevue. I'd met with him twice. He was soft-spoken, professional, sympathetic. He'd run a few cognitive tests, asked questions about my sleep and stress levels, and diagnosed me with early signs of cognitive decline, possibly the beginning of something more serious. He'd written me a prescription, donepezil. It's commonly used for memory issues, he'd explained. It should help. I'd been taking it ever since, but now sitting on the couch with Vanessa beside me, her hand resting on my knee, I felt a cold knot of suspicion tightening in my chest. "I'll call him Monday," I said. She smiled. "Good, I just want you to be okay." After Vanessa went to bed, I stayed downstairs and pulled out my phone. I opened a search engine and typed Dr. Howard Mitchell, Seattle, Neurology. Nothing. I tried Dr. Howard Mitchell, Bellevue. Still nothing. I tried the Washington State Medical Board database, searched for his name and specialty. No results. My hands were shaking now. I pulled out the business card Dr. Mitchell had given me, heavy cardstock embossed lettering, a phone number, and email address. I dialed the number. It rang twice, then clicked over to an automated answering service. "Thank you for calling. Please leave a message with your name and number, and someone will return your call during business hours." No mention of a doctor, no medical practice name, just a generic voicemail. I hung up and immediately called Sharon. She answered on the second ring. "Mr. Pierce, I think my wife has been drugging me." There was a pause. Then, "Tell me everything." I told her about the coffee, the vitamins, the memory problems that had started 4 months ago. I told her about Dr. Mitchell, the diagnosis, the prescription, the fact that he didn't seem to exist anywhere in the public record. Sharon was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was tight and controlled. "I need you to bring me that coffee sample and one of those pills, first thing tomorrow morning. Don't drink anything she gives you. Don't take any more of those vitamins. And whatever you do, don't let her know you're suspicious." "I won't." "Good. We're going to find out exactly what she's been giving you." I ended the call and sat in the dark living room staring at nothing. Vanessa hadn't just imprisoned my daughter. She'd been poisoning me. Sharon called me Monday morning while I was sitting in my office pretending to review budget reports. "Jonathan, we need to meet. Right now." Her voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. 20 minutes later, I was standing in her office near Pike Place Market. The space was small and efficient. A desk, filing cabinets, a wall covered in corkboard and photographs. Files were spread across every surface. Sharon gestured for me to sit. She looked like she hadn't slept. "I had the coffee and the pill tested by a lab I trust," she said without preamble. "The results came back this morning." She slid a printed report across the desk. I stared at the list of chemical compounds, the numbers and abbreviations that meant nothing to me. "The coffee contained 2 substances," Sharon continued, "donepezil and lorazepam. High doses of both." I looked up. "What are those?" "Donepezil is used to treat Alzheimer's. It's supposed to improve memory and cognitive function in people who actually need it. But in a healthy person, especially combined with lorazepam, which is a sedative, it can cause confusion, disorientation, and significant memory impairment." My stomach turned. "The pill you gave me, the so-called vitamin Partin." She tapped another report. "Zolpidem. That's a prescription sleep aid. It was mixed with a low dose of an antidepressant that can cause drowsiness and cognitive fog." So she was systematically destroying your cognitive function. Yes. Sharon's voice was flat professional, but I could see the anger in her eyes. "If you'd continued taking these substances within a few months, you'd have exhibited signs of serious mental decline, enough that someone could argue you were no longer capable of managing your own affairs." I felt like the floor was tilting beneath me. "There's more." Sharon pulled a manila folder from the pile and opened it. Inside was a photograph of a coffee cup, the one I'd brought her in the thermos. She dusted it for fingerprints. I ran the prints through a database I have access to. Vanessa Sterling doesn't exist in any official record before 2020. No birth certificate, no driver's license, no tax returns. Nothing. She pulled out another document. But these fingerprints match someone else. She turned her laptop toward me. On the screen was a driver's license photo from Nevada. The woman in the picture was younger. Her hair a different color and style, but the face was unmistakable. Vanessa. Victoria Brooks, Sharon said. She lived in Las Vegas from 2012 to 2015. In 2013, she married a man named James Brooks. He was 62, a retired real estate investor. Comfortable, but not wealthy. I stared at the photo. James Brooks passed away suddenly in June of 2015, listed as stroke. Victoria inherited approximately $720,000. The local police opened an investigation. Family members suspected foul play, but they couldn't find any evidence of wrongdoing. The case was closed. She pulled out another file. Kaisa. The same fingerprints also matched this woman. Another driver's license photo. Different name, different state, but the same face. Vivian Sterling, Phoenix, Arizona, 2016 to 2019. She married Patrick Morrison in early 2017. He was 58, owned a successful construction company. Sharon's voice remained steady, clinical, but I could barely breathe. Patrick Morrison passed away in August of 2019. He fell down the stairs in their home. The medical examiner ruled it accidental. Vivian inherited his estate, approximately $1.1 million. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Jonathan, Sharon said quietly, your wife is a professional. She's what law enforcement calls a black widow. She targets older men with money, marries them, and then arranges for them to have accidents or sudden medical emergencies. She inherits their money and moves on to the next target. She laid out 3 photos side by side on the desk. James Brooks, Patrick Morrison, and a professional headshot of me from the Pierce Development website. Your husband number 3. The words hit me like a physical blow. I've already filed petitions to exhume the bodies of James Brooks and Patrick Morrison. Sharon continued. It'll take a few weeks to get the court orders, but I'm confident we'll find evidence of poisoning. Arsenic, maybe. Or something more sophisticated that mimics natural causes. I stared at the faces of the 2 men. They looked happy in their photos. They'd loved her, trusted her, just like I had. How? My voice came out hoarse. How did she find me? I don't know yet, but I will. Sharon closed the files and looked at me directly. The good news is you're still alive. You found out before she could finish whatever she was planning. The bad news is now that Natalie's gone, Vanessa will know something is wrong. We need to move carefully. I nodded numb. There's one more thing. Sharon pulled up another document on her laptop. I found a record of a wire transfer from Stephen Barrett's personal account. $50,000 sent to an account registered under the name Victoria Brooks. That was in September of last year, 4 months before Natalie disappeared. My chest tightened. Stephen was paying her. It looks that way. Why, what does he get out of this? That's what we need to find out. I stood up, my legs unsteady. The room felt too small, the walls closing in. Go home, Sharon said. Act normal. Don't let her see that anything's changed. I'll keep digging and we'll figure out the next step. I left her office and walked to my car. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at nothing. Vanessa Sterling, Victoria Brooks, Vivian Sterling. 3 names, 3 husbands, 2 of them gone. I'd never known who she was. I'd married a stranger, a predator, who'd built an entire life around a lie, who'd smiled at me across the breakfast table while poisoning my coffee, who'd locked my daughter in a concrete room and watched her waste away. And I'd loved her. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't know who my wife was, but I was going to find out. I needed to understand why Stephen had betrayed me. Not just for the sake of the investigation, not just to build a case. I needed to know. We'd worked together for 18 years. He'd been at my wedding. He'd held Natalie when she was born. He'd stood beside me at Jennifer's memorial service. What had I done to make him hate me enough to help a woman imprison my daughter? I went down to the garage late that night after Vanessa had gone to bed. The space was cluttered with old storage boxes, things I'd never bothered to sort through, relics from the early days of Pierce development. I pulled down a box labeled 2009 Projects and opened it. Inside were folders, blueprints, contracts. I dug through them until I found what I was looking for. Millennium Tower. The project that had put Pierce development on the map. A 20-story mixed-use building in downtown Seattle, residential commercial, with a public plaza that won 3 design awards. It was the job that had established our reputation, that had opened doors we'd only dreamed of before. I opened the folder and spread the blueprints across the garage floor. They were covered in handwriting. Notes in the margins, calculations, sketches of alternative structural approaches. Stephen's handwriting. I stared at the pages and slowly, sickeningly, a memory surfaced. March 2009. Stephen had come to my office with a design he'd been working on for months. It was brilliant, bold, innovative, with a structural system that balanced aesthetics and engineering in a way I'd never seen before. He'd been so excited, talking a mile a minute, showing me every detail. This could be our breakthrough, Jonathan. This could change everything. I'd told him it was incredible. I'd told him we'd present it together. But then I'd looked at the design more carefully, and I'd seen ways to refine it, small adjustments to the facade, changes to the floor plan that would make it more marketable. I'd spent a week reworking his concept, making it my own. And when the time came to present to the client, I'd gone alone. I found the presentation cover sheet at the bottom of the stack. In my own handwriting, dated March 2009, Millennium Tower. Presented by J. Pierce Development Corporation. Stephen's name was nowhere on it. I closed my eyes, feeling sick. I kept digging through the box and found a stack of old printed emails clipped together with a rusted binder clip. I flipped through them. The first was from Stephen, dated April 2009. Jonathan, you took my design. You removed my name like I never existed. I gave you that project because I thought we were partners, because I trusted you. I won't forget this. Stephen. My reply was below it. I winced as I read my own words. Stephen, you're overreacting. I refined it significantly. The client loved my version. That's how business works. Move on. J. And then, at the bottom, one final message from Stephen. You're right. I'll move on. But someday, Jonathan, you'll understand what you took from me. Susan. I sat back on the cold concrete floor, the emails trembling in my hands. 15 years. He'd waited 15 years. I thought back to that time, 2009, 2010. Stephen had stayed with the company. He'd kept working, kept smiling, kept showing up to meetings and client dinners. I'd assumed he'd gotten over it. I'd assumed we'd moved past it. But he hadn't. He'd been waiting. A horrible thought crept into my mind. I pulled out my phone and called Harold. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy. Jonathan, it's almost midnight. What's wrong? Harold, I need to ask you something about Jennifer. A pause. All right. Stephen, did he ever have feelings for her? The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. My Harold. Jonathan, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but given everything that's happening. He sighed. Stephen proposed to Jennifer. in 2011, before you two started seeing each other. The world tilted. What? He asked her to marry him. She told me about it because she wasn't sure how to handle it. She cared about him, but not that way. She said there was something cold about him, something that made her uncomfortable. What did she say to him